The Tuskegee Airmen, also known as the 332nd Fighter Group, were African-American pilots who fought for America in World War II, who went on to break barriers throughout history and went on to be great pilots and generals.
In March of 1941, the Tuskegee Airmen arrived in Moton Field, which is now a museum and was the first civilian pilot training program. They were immediately criticized and was getting mass amounts of racism from their white commanding officers. They would never let them go so far as graduating. That's until former First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt stepped in and actually flew with one of the African American pilots, which secured their relationship.
In the process of leaving the hospital, she saw this field with some airplanes flying with two people in it, both being colored. She stopped to find out what was going on. And what was happening was what they called at that time the CPT program, Civilian Pilot Training Program, which had nothing to do with the war. There were 4 Negro colleges, this being one, that had a program of developing pilots, but it had nothing whatsoever to do with the war. And that's when she took the ride in this airplane that's behind me, which is a Piper Cub. The instructors here in that CPT program were all Negro instructors. Actually, Negro pilots actually started in the 20s, but here it is now, probably 1940, early 41. The Secret Service had advised Mr. Anderson, Charles Alfred Anderson, lovingly called Chief, if she asked you to take her for a flight, don't you do it? So the way he would tell it to us, he said when she said, I'd like to go for a ride, he looked at the Secret Service, then looked at her and said, well, she's the boss. So she climbs in. Chief took off and left the pattern. And as he said, when he left the pattern, the Secret Service went to the phone and called her husband, the president, Franklin D. Roosevelt. Hey, your wife is up flying with these black guys down here. Well, we weren't called black then. And they left the pattern. But Chief, and I have this on videotape, where she enjoyed the flight.
Shortly after Eleanor Roosevelt's flight with Charles Anderson, her husband, President Roosevelt, issued the executive order establishing the Tuskegee program.
If Mrs. Eleanor Roosevelt hadn't have been a staunch supporter of our cause, the Tuskegee experiment had never gotten off the ground. And if it had gotten off the ground, we doubt very much we would have been sent overseas to prove that we could do if we get an opportunity. You see, when President Roosevelt finally ordered the Army to start training Negroes to become pilots, over 15,000 of us took and passed the exam, but they only took them.
The Tuskegee Airmen almost caused the U.S. government to close the training program because of multiple accidental deaths and plane crashes. Luckily, the U.S. did not shut down the program and had a little bit more faith in the airmen.
After Miss Roosevelt pushed for the Tuskegee Airmen to be allowed in the Air Force, the first black commander, George Roberts, or nicknamed by his peers George Spanky Roberts, was assigned to the 332nd Group. The 332nd Flight Group was the 99th, 100th, and 101st Flight Group. They were all combined and were to move up to Italy as escort bombers.
But they were segregated from the rest of the Air Force. When they made the first all-black Air Corps, the white pilots and commanders from other bases didn't know about it at the time.
They graduated flight school in 1942, but did not receive their first mission until 1943. They were sent to North Africa to face the superior German and Italians, and their pilots were which outranked them in pilot class. The Tuskegee Airmen managed to surrender them with no ground troops helping them.
After the Tuskegee Airmen broke through all the walls of racist remarks and actions, they destroyed and damaged 36 German planes and 237 of the ground troops. Now they are receiving mass amounts of praise, with more than 300 original airmen receiving congressional gold medals from presidents.
Also, Charles McGee, a fighter pilot in the Vietnam War, helped flip the coin in Super Bowl 54. Charles also was at the State of the Union address to earn the role of Brigadier General, and even though he is the last living Tuskegee Airman, his memory and everyone's memory of the broken barriers by the Tuskegee Airmen.